The episode begins with Rentt talking to the elf he met last episode. The elf is surprised to see someone else here. Rentt asks if he's alone, and mentions that the Tarrasque swamp isn't a place for a normal person. The elf wonders if Rentt is implying that he's not normal. He simply possesses a magical item that nullifies poison, and holy water that drives the Tarrasque away, as well as an accurate map. He's after the dragon flower as well. Realizing that they're not going to fight each other, they start collecting some of the flowers. Rentt notices that he only picks one, and asks if that's all he needs. The elf tells him yes. His mistress wants the flower itself. The medicine that it makes lasts a while, but the flower themselves won't if they're plucked. Rentt apologizes for prying, and asks if his mistress is ill, which she is. So Rentt tells him he hopes they get better soon. The elf thanks him and brings up that him and his mistress were fortunate they were able to make his acquaintance. He was looking for someone who could bring them dragon blood flowers at regular intervals. If the pay and conditions are to his liking, he would appreciate it if Rentt would accept. The elf eventually introduces himself as Isaac Hart. As for his mistress, he'll introduce Rentt to her after the arrangements are finalized. After that, we see Rentt back in town, with the carriage driver fawning over how strong Rentt is. Not many people can come back from that swamp unharmed. Rentt tells him his mask is just a way to hide his identity. He's actually a mithril class adventurer. Upon entering the guild, he runs into Sheila. Rentt tells her he'd like to return his magic bag, and hire someone to butcher a monster. Sheila is surprised. Did he defeat one? But Rentt tells her to be quiet, as he notices that everyone is looking at them. Rentt tells her there's a lot, so Sheila agrees to show him to the butcher. As they make their way there, we get some information about monsters. Monsters don't just drop magic stones. Their bodies can be butchered to provide many different materials. Rentt learned how to do the basics while he was learning to be a hunter, but for things he can't handle, he pays the money to hire a specialist. They meet with someone named Dario. Sheila tells him Rentt brought them something unusual for them, that being the Tarrasque. The room is ready, so they tell Rentt to bring it out. So he does, and the room is filled with poison, which explains why they're wearing masks. Dario is inspecting the corpse, and is impressed that there's not a single wound on the shell. The normal way to fight a Tarrasque is to attack from outside the range of its poison to weaken it, so the shell always gets damaged, and asks Rentt if he killed it in basically a single hit. Rentt tells him he just didn't have enough time to land multiple hits. In the end, Dario agrees to butcher it for him. As they leave, Rentt decides to head to the orphanage tomorrow, and thanks Sheila for staying out so late with him. Sheila tells him no problem, and brings up that Rentt has gotten a lot stronger. He defeated that huge Tarrasque all by himself. He's at the high end of bronze. Actually, he could easily be silver. After that, Rentt is thinking to himself that he does feel stronger, but saying that he, himself, has gotten stronger feels weird. He just took advantage of his undead body. His strength is something he just got by becoming a monster. Of course he wants to go back to being human, but without this power, he'll go back to who he was before. Could he go back to that and still try to become mithril? Rentt returns to the orphanage, and runs into Alice, telling her the job is done, which surprises her. As they sit down, the guy to her right brings up that it's rare to see a dragon blood flower that's been prepared so well. Rentt is surprised. The only adventurers who go to the Tarrasque swamp are of fairly high rank, right? They should all know how to properly prepare herbs. The guy tells him, well, because of how dangerous the area is, there's not a lot of time to do things properly. The guy next to Rentt brings up that Rentt must be a powerful adventurer, and introduces himself as Umberto, the healer. And the guy next to Elise is named Norman, the herbalist. With a flower of this quality, Norman can make medicine to treat Malakuma really quickly, and asks Alice if there's any left over, can he use it? There are people who need it. Upon hearing that, Rentt asks if he wants more. They tell him of course, so Rentt hands over 3 more. He doesn't want payment, just put them to good use. Umberto tells Rentt that he can't pay him right now, but if he needs something in the future, tell him. While that's going on, we see Edel giving commands to the rest of the rats. After that, Elise hands Rentt proof that the job is complete. She can't thank him enough. She was going to become an adventurer and get it herself if nobody took the job, but she doesn't think that would have worked. Rentt asks if she doesn't want to become an adventurer anymore. She tells him it's quite the opposite. She wants to become an adventurer even more now. She wants to become an adventurer like Rentt, one who can help people. Though right now she can't really do anything to help him. Rentt tells her that's not true. There are times when he needs help. When that happens, he'll come to her. Edel returns back to Rentt, and Rentt brings up that the monsters in the basement will protect them from now on. Before he leaves, Rentt tells Elise that if she wants to become an adventurer, she should start training early. The guild holds classes, and he can train her too when he has the time. Also, if she has mana, she should learn magic too. Elise is hesitant. Training is very expensive, and she doesn't have any money. Rentt brings up that he's got a friend who doesn't have anything to do with her time, so don't worry about it. But Elise refuses. She can't count on him for that much. Rentt suggests lending her the money with no interest. When she becomes an adventurer and starts earning money, she can pay him back. Rentt is now back home talking to Lorane. She doesn't mind teaching her. There are indeed times when she's not doing anything. Like Rentt said. Rentt apologizes. He meant when she's free. Lorane suggests that he should be careful with his words. He doesn't understand how young girls feel. Rentt thanks her for the warning, but he has very few interactions with young girls, so he doesn't really think it's applicable. Lorane corrects him. Of course he does. There's a young girl he knows quite well. See? Rentt still doesn't know what she's talking about, so he asks, where? Which obviously ticks off Lorane, and she brings up that she just remembered this extremely powerful spell she just developed, and decides to see just how much his undead body can take. Rentt, realizing the danger he's in now, starts belting off compliments, calling her skin as fair as driven snow, and her statuesque figure. Even the water fairies created by the goddess of beauty as the physical manifestation of her virtue would bow their heads at the sight of her gorgeous face. She's the very picture of a young girl in every way. Lorane wonders where the hell did he learn to talk like that? Does he say that to every girl he meets? Rentt tells her of course not. He just said what he was thinking. Lorane is taken aback and goes to get him more food. She looks at herself in the mirror and realizes what Rentt said got to her a little. The next day, Edel is sleeping. Rentt returns to the guild. Sheila pulls him into another room and asks if Rentt knows anyone in the Latour household, but he's never heard of them. Sheila brings up that there's a job specifically requesting him. Upon seeing the letter, he realizes it's probably from Isaac. However, neither of them know much about the Latour household. Sheila knows they're not nobles, but they're a very old house, with a lot of influence over Maalt. Each generation's guildmaster is told to be very careful not to offend the Latour household, and tells Rentt that if he's going to live in Maalt, he absolutely can't refuse a request from the Latours. But she's worried. If they find out that Rentt is a monster, they'll kill him instantly. But Rentt tells her that when he met Isaac, he didn't seem to care about his appearance. If it was an issue, he wouldn't have made the request at all. Next, we see Norman and Umberto telling the headmistress about her condition, which confirms her suspicion, meaning she'll need to tell the church to send a replacement. But they tell her no need, and hand her the medicine made from the dragon blood flower. She needs to take 1 pill a day. Little by little, they will dissolve the foulness building within her body. Rentt sees the Latour household off in the distance. As he approaches, he talks to the guard about the maze blocking the way, asking if he needs to go through it even if he's here for a job. The guard tells him yes. So Rentt asks if maps cost money. The guard tells him there's no point. A special magic item was used to make the garden, so the path changes. Rentt is surprised that a magic item like that exists. The guard brings up that the heads of the Latour household have always collected magic items. He's told that this was part of their collection, and those who make it through the maze and reach the mansion can receive a magic item from the head of the household. Rentt thanks him for the info and asks one final question. He assumes the guard has completed the maze, so he asks for any possible advice. The guard points up and tells him that the sun won't help him, and supposes that's enough of a hint. Rentt thanks him and heads in. Rentt is excited about the prospect of getting another magical item, because he'll need some in order to become a mithril-class adventurer. And Rentt isn't too worried about the maze. He's got a good sense of direction after all. He can draw a mental map that's more than enough for a maze's size. However, After a while, he realizes he's totally lost. Rentt tries using his magic item, that's the map, which shows the layout of each dungeon. However, it doesn't work. Rentt probably assumes it's because it's not a dungeon, so he decides to just move on. Then the episode ends. Some personal thoughts. I didn't realize it until I was creating this script for this video, but I bet the mistress Isaac is trying to heal is the elf lady Rentt ran into during what I think is the second episode, when he was exploring the dungeon and went to that secret area. Also, I feel like the magic item Rentt is going to receive will allow him to appear to be human, mostly because Rentt keeps saying that he wouldn't mind staying a monster. It's just his appearance that he worries about. I really don't have much to say about this episode, because it kinda tied up loose ends with the orphanage and him using the Tarask body, though we don't know what will become of that. Maybe it'll be new armor or something like that. But we'll just have to see what happens with this new plot point, that being the Latour household. So I'll be looking forward to that. A decent episode. If you enjoyed I do, consider subscribing. It's a good way to show support. If you have any feedback or suggestions, you can put that in the comments down below. I'm looking forward to next week, but that's about it. So yeah,